just the quality of life is incredible. It's so high that now anywhere we travel, we find it not comparable. We breathe clean air, AQI is 5. We drink water from the tap and we get top quality produce. So just quality of life is so good.
Welcome to a new episode of Chai Pe Kharcha. Today it is a first on two counts. We, for the first time, have a couple as guests on the show. So we've had men guests and women guests separately, but we've never had a couple. So hopefully we don't cause an argument in the episode and after it. Also, the first is a episode coming from someone living in Australia. So that hopefully this will be a piece where we learn a lot about the cost of living there and also some aspects of the culture. So welcome Rohan and Akansha. Thank you for coming on. And what we'll start with is if you could give us each of your backgrounds, if you could start with your pre-NRI piece where you studied and how you came to be as NRIs and what you're doing now.
Sure. No, thanks, Sid and Madhvesh, for having us. This is so exciting for us because I think this is again a very dear topic to us, and we love speaking to friends and family who want to move out of the country. So, thank you for having us. And just to give you a bit of my background, I was born in Bombay, but I've grown up in Bangalore and Hyderabad and did my schooling, my college there. I'm also a chartered accountant and I've done my MBA at ISV in India. And in terms of work, I've worked with KPMG and then Microsoft in India, post which the two of us moved to Australia. That was in 2018, I think. Yeah, 2018. I still have my parents and my brother and new sister in law in India. So that's my connection back to India. But the two of us have started a family here. So now Australia is home. Rohan?
Thanks, Sid and Navesh. And I think we're always happy to be trendsetters. So nice for us to join as a couple. For me, I'm from Bombay. Went to boarding school in Dehradun, college in Singapore, my MBA back in India at the Indian School of Business. Did some work around in Unilever and then consulting with BCG. And then 2018, like AK said, is when we got married. And I think within 2 months of getting married, we found ourselves in Australia. So that's the journey.
Awesome. अच्छा sir, Singapore से कहाँ? Where did you study in Singapore?
Singapore Management University, SMU.
SMU. Okay. Okay.
Business Management at SMU.
Awesome.
We both are actually NUS alums.
Yeah, we both are from NUS. Yes.
Oh, very nice. And this was for your undergrad?
Masters, yeah, postgrad for both of us.
Very nice.
But yeah, so this opens up an interesting piece, and we'll come back to the Singapore.
I've spent 5 years in Singapore also, so I have a bit of context mapping across both these countries.
Exactly. Oh, that's yeah, that's good topic. Actually, I'll just ask one question on Australia, and then we'll go to the Singapore piece because that'll be a good transition when we ask questions on Australia. As you've been in Australia and you both are in Melbourne, so you've been in Melbourne throughout, right? Since 2018.
No, so initially we moved to Queensland, which is a state in northern part of Australia. It was a small little city called Cairns. That's where the Great Barrier Reef is. That's where Rohan's first job was. So that's why we moved there. And eventually I also managed to get a job there. But we were there for about 3.5 years before moving to Melbourne 3 years ago. So yeah, in total 6 years now.
Okay. And the question that I was coming to was, are you both PRs or citizens in Australia? Yeah. Or citizens. Okay.
Yeah, we've been citizens for 2 years now. So.
Acha. So that'll also have a chain of questions with it. Let's go back to the Singapore piece. And so Akansha, sorry?
because I'm no part of the Singapore story. As if he was fidgeting with the Zoom blur background where he blurred me out.
Okay, so Singapore, you mentioned that you've been there for 5 years. And in terms of considering a switch to another country and Australia eventually, what was the factor that led you to take a decision ki, "Acha, I don't want to continue in Singapore and move somewhere else"?
It's of course a very intensely personal choice. And for us, the factors that mattered. So we, like I said, we got married and we spent some time looking at Kia, what is important to us. A variety of things. You've got proximity to India, you've got quality of life, you've got compensation potential.
So sorry to interrupt you. Can we just scale back to even like taking the Singapore decision? Why did you even choose Singapore in the first place? And then
I missed that.
Why did you
we can
move to
just start
Singapore?
a journey from
I
India.
didn't move to
So
Singapore
what
in the
made you?
first place.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was right after my 12th grade, and I was looking at where to explore doing college. And I had a couple of options, a couple of admits from the States and the UK and Singapore. And back then, for me, the important part was Singapore was a very strong growth story. And I generally thought I wanted to be in the geography. And there was also a cost, of course. And back then, I don't know if they still do it, but Singapore, the government was very conducive in the sense supporting overseas students with educational finance facilities and so forth. So back then it sort of stacked up really well कि बाहर जा रहा है, exposure मिल रहा है, not too far away, 5 hour flight away or whatever, and it's cost effective enough, and there is a whole growth story when it comes to jobs and potential career and so forth.
Yeah, and then life at Singapore and then shift to Australia.
So I think so I I did college in Singapore for 4 years, then I worked there for a year with Unilever, then went back to India. AK has also lived in Singapore when she was younger with her family, father's family. So we both had some exposure to Singapore, and it boils down to what you want and how you see your life shaping up. And for us, I think Australia, the promise was great work-life balance, great outdoors, healthy food, the whole culture around hobbies and sport. So I've had this hypothesis since when I was very young. Australia would be a great place to raise a family. I don't know why, as a young child, that's what I thought. when I was in college.
Believe it or not, I did not want to leave India. I said, no way are we leaving India. I'm not going to leave my parents. I don't care what you think. And at that time, I was working with Microsoft. So I was traveling a fair bit to Seattle. I would go every 3 months. So I had quite a bit of work experience in America, and it had totally put me off. Just the toxic work culture, racism, the way people look at brown people, and it just felt like another India. Racism and rampant in India as well, so it wasn't different. But I just felt like very alien in America. I felt alien there. So I was very, oh, I can holiday wherever I want, but I'm never leaving India. Mera Bharat Mahan. So there's a big battle for him to convince me to move to Australia. And I loved my job at Microsoft. I was very well placed there. And he's like, oh, just let's go there for a year. Acha nahi laga, then you can always come back to India.
This was 3 months. 3 months, we will come back.
That's what.
So we actually sat down, and unfortunately, because we'd gotten our MBA, she was in Microsoft, I was in BCG, so we had the privilege of mobility. We knew that generally, if we decide a country, we can pretty much go there. So we sat in front of a map, and we looked at the US, we looked at Canada. So US for us was too crazy, Canada was too cold, Europe had its own sort of failings in our minds, and Singapore didn't quite stack up the life we wanted to live. And Australia just seemed to tick every box, despite neither of us having ever been to Australia. This was all through primary, secondary research, लोगों से बात करके हमने थोड़ा सा दिमाग लगाया. It was a pure gamble. And the way I convinced AK, I said, यार कोशिश करते हैं, जाते हैं. If we don't like it, nothing stops us from coming back. We've got a great setup in India. We've got networks in India. Inshallah, we'll be able to get jobs back or get good jobs. So we're young. Why not take that gamble? And
Cool.
I
And
think 6 years down the line, it's been.
I don't want to move back to India.
can
I
you
mean,
name some
it's
of those 3 to 5 boxes?
changed us. Sorry.
You mentioned some 3 to 5 boxes that Australia ticked for you guys. What were those boxes?
I honestly didn't consider anything. I was so in love with Microsoft, so in love with my country. I just said, okay, in 3 months I'm going to be back. So I just said, okay, meri shadi hui hai. I'm going to go follow my husband to the end of the world. So all the box ticking was done by him.
Nice. I think
What were
that's
the
one of the
boxes?
sentences all of the NRIs say, that we always want to come back to India.
Yeah, we're in the absolute opposite camp. I think Australia is home. No matter, again, we still retain that flexibility. I think we will in the next 10 years, 15 years, spend time in different countries, a few years here, a few years there. But Australia will always be home. It's in 6 short years, it's really become, um, yeah, the place we want to come back to.
Yeah. And in terms of the top boxes, was it like the economy, like you mentioned, work-life balance? Can we just delve deeper into that? Like what all?
Hi, so I think back then, the things that I was in consulting, right? And I always heard these stories, and we used to work really long hours in India. And I heard these stories about BCG Sydney office, 4 p.m. They break out the beers and they go surfing. And I'm like, ये क्या जिंदगी है? Because हमारे यहाँ तो 5:30 p.m. on a Friday, you are having your afternoon break. कि चाय बिस्किट खाओ, and then 4 more hours, 5 more hours काम लगाना है उसके बाद. So I'd heard all these anecdotal stories about work culture being fantastic. Here, of course, AK is a huge sports fanatic, and if you follow sport, any sport,
Yeah.
swimming, cricket, hockey, Australia has got a great sporting culture. So we
Mm.
found that very interesting. Then just we spoke to a few people. They said, "Ki yaar, yahan pe everybody's got work is not your priority. You've got family, you've got health, you've got your hobbies. You have time to develop and work on hobbies." So that again was very appealing to us. And of course, like very practical. Now I don't talk about it because back then it was a big goal for me was passport change.
Mhm.
For us, a big factor was key you have a clear pathway within 4 years to changing your passport, to getting a top 5, top 7 passport, which instantly, to my mind, unlocks global mobility
Mhm.
as a tourist, as a professional worker. Another thing that I now talk about is ki yaar, the peace of mind I have ki by being Australian ki if for the rest of our lives, healthcare and education for my family is taken care of. So jitna bhi downside I that sort of is taken. That's a huge sort of burden off my mind.
By
Cool.
that he means it's free.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
completely taken care of by the Australian government.
And most of these benefits come with a bigger tax bill. So how do you guys
100%,
view that?
100%. In fact, one of the questions Rohit had sent was, what are some of the misconceptions or what surprised you? So I was thinking about it and I said, what surprised me other than the usual culture shock, malls shutting at 5 p.m., or people
Yeah.
walking in shirtless in malls, or just walking past on a street and everybody's helloing you and good day, mate. We're not used to that in India. I was like, why is he helloing me? What's the intent? But other than those usual things, one episode that really shocked us was in India, you're always trying to save tax. I'm a chartered accountant, I've done
Of course.
taxes for years and I still do them, and we're still finding loopholes and all of that. So we tried to do the same when we came here. And in our first year, we went to meet a tax accountant and we asked him, can we set up a trust here? We had different options of how we
Mhm.
wanted to save tax. And this man just looked at us and said, why do you want to save tax? Just pay it to the government. What are you hiding? That was his question. And we didn't understand it back then, but now, 6 years down the line, after we've lived a life here, after being tax paying residents, we understand where our money goes. We are enjoying
Mhm.
and reaping the benefits of that money that we pay. So we don't mind paying that 50% tax that we pay. Yes, it is a lot,
Mhm.
but when you have an emergency C section at 4 a.m. in the night and 3 days later you walk out without paying a single dollar, You know where your taxpayer money is going. On a Sunday, you feel like having a barbecue party and you don't own a barbecue. You just go down to the park and there's beautiful, clean, working barbecues
Hmm.
just available for you to use as a community. It's incredible. So, yes, while we do pay 50% tax, it doesn't pinch us anymore.
That's
Gadde
a
nahi
good
hoti yahan pe
approach.
roads pe. And if there is, you
The,
have to click a photo and send it to the government. In 2 days, it'll be filled up.
Nice,
wow.
nice.
That's a very unique perspective because actually I've never heard this.
But it's the first time you're speaking to an Australian.
Yeah,
Nay, my
as
cousin,
Indians, I think, as you said,
maybe I have not
पहले
talked about
बचाओ,
tax.
पैसा बचाओ.
हाँ नहीं पर ये यूएस में भी है यार. The friends that we have in the US, the mentality is the same. In fact, हमारे friend क्या खुद Americans का भी, if you see
Even the
most of
state of
the
welfare utilities in US is
not
Yeah,
that's
so
not a fair comparison. The US healthcare though is a whole different basket case.
problem.
yeah.
Also, I feel the societies are very different.
Hmm.
India, America, very capitalist societies. It's all about me. How do I profit? How do I make more money? It's very money centric, profit. Yeah. Australia is just a different society. It's very social. It's more about giving. It's a very pehle aap culture. Road pe bhi cars will line up. No, you go first, and we'll just keep waiting for 20 seconds to see which car wants to go first. So I think maybe as individuals personally, we adapted very quickly to this society and it accepted us. So we liked it. Yeah. We're not, we do save money, of course. We're Indian at the end of the day, but the tax doesn't pinch us that much.
Yeah, I
All
think
right.
this is a good segue to go into in terms of expenses and how do you manage stuff on a day-to-day basis. Uh, shall we move on to that section, Sid?
Yeah, let's do that because the 50% tax also we'll do the cost of living first and then we'll go into the investment because I'm pretty interested to know if Australia is not as capitalist, how do you allocate money? Do you keep it in Australia, keep it outside? But let's go to the cost of living first. Yeah. In terms of, if you could give a very rough breakdown starting from housing, and so we'll go section by section within cost of living. So within, and if you assume 100 rupees as the monthly uh, income coming in, how much will go into housing?
When you say housing, do you
Appro-
mean rent or mortgage?
Mortgage,
Rent,
anything.
mortgage, either.
I'm going to let Rohan take
Hmm.
this because it's a very subjective question. We are renters, we are not home, at least for now. So, do you want to talk about the housing and
Hmm.
how that's priced? Yeah.
So let's take it this way. Australia is an expensive country. And the fundamental reason why it's expensive is because minimum wage is very high. The cost of labor is extremely high. Australia is the first country to, in fact, introduce minimum wage globally.
Hmm.
It's an island in one corner of the world, so everything costs more. And so, even though we sell absolute numbers salary wise do pretty okay, tax is high and expenses are high. Base quality of life here is very good.
Hmm.
The moment you get into upper end of middle class is when you're pinched the most
Hmm.
because you're sort of offsetting a larger cross section of society. So that's the basic context. Housing typically would end up being, I imagine, 20 to 30%. That's what people try to retain. It's typically universal across the world. As far as possible, people will tweak it up and down depending on what drives them. Home ownership is expensive in Australia, and the real estate is the most prized asset class traditionally. So a lot of people have a vast majority of their net worth tied up in real estate. For both AK and I, the real estate game didn't make sense, not
Hmm.
from a returns point of view, nor from a impeding on our flexibility point of view. If I buy a $2 million house today, again, it's expensive here. So the median price, for example, in Sydney to buy a house would be $1.5 million, thereabouts. So if I buy a $1.5 million house today, we're not sure कि few years down the line हम कौन से city में या कौन से state में होंगे, तो much less कौन से suburb में होंगे, तो हमको इसका sense नहीं बैठता है. But yeah, before sort of going into that, so 20 to 30% is what I would imagine most people want to keep.
Right. ठीक है.
Most people want to keep it. I'm not sure if they do.
The housing stress is, of course, is a very real factor.
And I'm assuming
Especially-
city center ke paas they'll be expensive and
Yes.
That's pretty stock
Also,
standard.
people want to buy big houses, 5 bedroom, 6 bedroom. Just personal preference.
And in terms of inflation as well, I assume like there was a steady increase in the recent past as it was around the world. And still it puts it in the 30% bracket.
Well, yeah, I'd imagine somewhere between
Okay.
20 to 30%. Yeah.
Cool.
ठीक है. Okay. So housing is the first. Then second is child expenses. As you mentioned, you have a 1-year-old baby. In terms of medical आपने बोला है कि is mostly covered. But yeah, outside of medical, what would be the main expenses?
For us, because we're both now full-time working parents, for us the biggest expense is daycare. Sending Rehan is our son's name, sending Rehan to daycare. So that tends to be our biggest expense. However, the government does subsidize that as well. But that depends on your income level, and all of different brackets come under that. But typically, we pay about $175 a day to send Rehan
Oh.
to. Yes.
So how it works, again, this is very interesting. So $175 a day is full cost of daycare, which works out typically 5 days a week, pay $40,000 a year. Now, this depends what the structure takes into account as household income and different slabs. And you will get up to starting from 95% subsidy on that all the way down to zero. So at every level, you will see that they've got systems in place to ensure that as far as possible, it's an egalitarian society. अगर आपको ज़रूरत है, the government will support you. But if you're earning $300,000 a year, then you don't need a subsidy. Then you will not get a subsidy.
So, for example, we started Ray off on 3 days of daycare while I was not working. I was still at home. So, obviously, we were on one income. So, we were getting a 60% subsidy at that point in time.
Wow.
And now that we've gone to dual income, we've gone above the particular slab that the government says subsidy is only for the needy. So, that's when, the subsidy starts to reduce.
100 में से कितने रुपीस हो जाएंगे वो approximately?
कब?
अगर real estate is 30 rupees.
Depends your income level, ना?
आप from your perspective.
अच्छा, हमारे case में तो the rent would even be much lower than 20 and 30 because we're not spending that much on rent. I thought you were asking for a general perspective.
General भी बता दो और आपको भी बता दो, so there'll be a
General rent 20 to 30%. हमारे case may be less than 10%. Daycare, child expenses, because
Right.
again, it's the moment you have the means, you then enroll your child into swimming classes. And
Correct.
I suppose वो भी होगा कितना होगा यार? 15%.
15%.
15%. That's very much.
Which
Okay.
is why
Why
we're
this-
waiting for him to school
So
age.
15
it's
is
free.
for you guys, and general में अगर average out
The general average.
Okay.
I have this
Okay, so
question on
15%.
housing then, right?
Sorry?
So 15%
Go on.
was on the child care, but going back to housing, it seems that you guys have, if you're okay to share, like it's a big tip that you have discovered, like you can bring your housing down to 10% when everyone else is spending like 20 to 30%. You guys are open to share, like what could be the thing that is helping you to save that big on housing? Is it like staying far away from the center, or could be anything? What's that?
No. So I think for us, the biggest thing is we rent, we don't own. We didn't go down that entire ownership route. And the biggest thing, again, for us was living in a good suburb close to the office, right? We don't want to be traveling 1, 2, 3 hours. So location was important. And our house it's sufficient for the three of us. It's a 3 bedroom house. We don't need more than that.
So we discussed housing, care. What would be
Childcare.
the other bigger the transport?
Utilities, I think utilities would be a big
Utilities, yeah.
bucket. So
Yeah.
if you could give again
Again, very,
out of
very
100 rupees,
expensive. Utilities, which comprises water, electricity, gas, utilities,
internet, mobile bill.
internet, mobile phone. It's very expensive. How much would that be?
About 5%.
5%?
Okay.
5%.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in
Yeah.
terms of heating and stuff, like, is it necessary that you guys use a lot of heating?
I feel like the answer is just going to be standard, very expensive. But we enjoy eating out a lot. Again, Melbourne's got a very vibrant eating out culture. That forms a big part of our expenses, I feel. We have an Excel sheet to track this. You just open that up and see the percentages.
But again, I think typically I'd say for most people, food and drink would be about 15%.
Really that high? What about groceries?
Yeah, let's just count that, groceries and food and drink. More for the median sort of spread. Yeah. Melbourne's got a great food culture and very cosmopolitan. And if you're earning money you want to spend on within limit on eating out.
15% is too high. I get more at 10. No more than 10.
Okay.
Including groceries.
Is it right to assume would these numbers change a lot if you compare with your life in Cairns before Melbourne?
Yes.
Was there?
Because that's a tier 2 town. We didn't eat out that much. No?
I think it's actually fairly similar. Scaled up and down. Because Cairns is more expensive.
Oh.
Wow. That's an interesting perspective. So it doesn't matter where you probably live in Australia, like you are bound to spend a lot.
Yes.
No,
some
because
of these
bigger
buckets.
cities again, you have a lot of cheaper options, but then the frequency also increases. You can step out in Aju Baju, you have all these random places. It's not always a sit-down restaurant. So मेरे हिसाब से it's pretty sort of consistent, balanced out.
Like you'd spend $100 just stepping out for a meal and one drink per person between the two of us. How much would somebody else spend?
From your friend Ken's.
$100 would be an average for one meal and one drink between two people.
And this is a high-end restaurant, or you're saying average?
Average.
Normal restaurant.
Yeah.
60-70.
Singapore so expensive lag raha hai
without drinks.
$60-70 at the local
Thai
Asian
restaurant.
place.
Yeah. That's the minimum. Yeah. And if you add a drink on top, then it'll go 80-100 for sure. Yeah.
This is extra. हमने अभी सिंगापुर का किया है, हमने $25 में हो रहा है.
$25.
Wow. Okay. Expensive. Okay. Commute कितना होगा? Bus, taxi, own car. How much would that? Petrol.
So we don't use public transport much because it's not very well developed in our area. So we use our car very frequently for everything, actually. That's the one thing we haven't taken to Australia. Australians walk a lot, we don't. But car, they just open up our Excel sheet. It's so much easier from that. So we have an Excel tracker.
You just give ballpark. It's fine.
Car, including insurance, fuel. And how much would be car?
For median, it's about 10%.
10 to 15%. Again, depends on the type of car you drive and how many cars you own.
From our area, it's much smaller percentage. We own our cars outright. We chose to not go for $100,000 car each. So it's effectively just fuel and insurance, which is a couple of percentage points.
Cool.
The 10%, yeah.
कितना हो गया?
For median, not for us.
We have done 20 housing, 15 childcare, तो हो गया 35, 15 for
Eating
food.
out. Yeah.
Eating out, grocery मिला के.
सब मिला के.
तो 50 हो गया.
Utilities.
And
Utilities,
was 5%, you said,
5%.
right?
5.
Okay. So
And
50.
transportation, another 7.
5 to 7, yeah.
62.
So 60.
Yeah.
Yeah.
और
And
उसके
this
ऊपर
would
टैक्स
cover.
50%.
Hmm.
बहुत महंगा ज्यादा हो रहा है. ठीक है.
I'd
Any
assume
other
like people scale different buckets based on. So maybe I'll just put this question this way, right? What do you think could be an effective saving percentage out of your income? Like take out taxation, take out your expenses and stuff. Like what's an ideal number someone can target?
What's an ideal number?
A percentage.
Yeah, ideal is
average
not the right
so
word. What can be a good number that one can estimate to
So
save?
there's two
reasonable.
parts. There's two things to consider. Okay, number one is 49% is the highest marginal tax rate. So 49% is we're paying for each additional dollar. In our case, and it's the highest tax slab. But apka effective tax rate for us, of course, is much lower than 49. Again, the average effective tax rate across the country will be, I'd imagine, at 30% or 25%. So it's not 50, say, but just percent vote karo, number one.
Okay.
Second thing is, agar aap average out karo households and the average household would be, because they're spending a significant amount, 30%, I said, up to in the mortgage. So that becomes their principal saving vehicle.
Yeah.
So they aren't saving beyond that. So I'd expect the average household saving less than 5% beyond.
Wow. So that doubles down as an investment as well.
Correct. Everybody, their principal, that's why my opening statement when I said most of them have their net worth tied in real estate, because that's what they do. They will get the biggest mortgage they can. They will buy the biggest land parcel they can, because land has value, not the dwelling on it. Units and apartments don't have value here in Australia. It's the land. For example, even our house currently is on a 3,500, 4,000 square foot land parcel. And that's small. So most people have their saving mentally in their mortgage. वो 30% वो बोल रहे कि अच्छा हम सेव कर रहे हैं, तो बाकी 70% उसमें से 25 हटा दो टैक्स का, 50%, 45% goes into expenses. That's generally the life they lead. Now, हमारे केस में we try and target 50% savings. So that's generally where we're operating at.
Yeah. And so let me rephrase the same question. Assume there is this young person, 28, 30-year-old, who's in India, who's looking to come to Australia, becoming an NRI, married. From their perspective, what would be a reasonable expectation for them in terms of saving? Assuming कि वो एकदम आके तो घर वर नहीं खरीदेंगे. So what would be the reasonable expectation there कि कितना save कर सकते हैं on a...
Exactly as 6 years ago. We were a young couple, married, moved to Australia on one job. है ना? Single income पे and आप optimize नहीं किया हुआ because you don't know क्या है क्या नहीं है.
Correct.
We were from day one, first couple of months down the line, it was settled over. We were being able to save. बहुत marginal था on one income. You were able to save. The moment you got a second income, it scaled up. Obviously, tax slabs also scaled up. But I think through Cairns, as a childless couple at that point in time, we 30%. Were at 30-35% savings.
Okay, that's good.
So that's a good.
And the important part, at least speaking for me, AK has always been financially prudent, and she's been a chartered accountant and so forth. I used to be a consultant in India, so I used to earn a lot of money. I used to spend more than I used to earn. I mean, so I had lakhs of worth of credit card bills every month. I used to get my salary paid off, and saving ka culture tha hi nahi until I moved to Australia.
Okay.
So aate hi, a couple of months down the line, we took stock. We said कि यार थोड़ा सा शादी वादी हो गई है, थोड़ा सा लगाते हैं कि क्या करना है. पहले लेफ्ट ओवर एजुकेशन लोन्स चुकाए, फिर हमने बोला कि चलो गाड़ी का जो है लोन, गाड़ी खरीदी वो निपटा दिया, and then we got down to a pretty good 30% saving cadence.
But you have to be conscious about doing it. You have to have your 30% or a number in mind, and you can automate the whole thing. And that's what we did. We took stock of kya expenses, where is it that we can cut down and where is it that we can't. So we built different buckets of household, which is non-negotiable, splurge, where you can, but niche. And we made an investment bucket as well, where that money comes and goes into investment without us even touching it. और जितना है splurge में उतना ही splurge करो. Until date, we've been conscious about that. Now, of course, our son has come and ruined everything, but such is
But
life.
we've still updated that. We still have our household bucket की ये हमारे non-negotiable घर चलाने के keeping the lights on expenses हैं, ये हमारा travel. Now we start travel to India fair bit. तो उसका अलग bucket है, investment automated है. So I feel like the biggest thing for us has been that एक तो सबसे पहले as a couple decide करना, being aligned. I think a couple most importantly need to be aligned on what their financial goals are. Number one. Number two कि फिर broad strokes numbers क्या है, 50, 30, 20 जो भी आपका वो है. And the third and the most important is आप automate करो. Just set and forget. जितना आप बोलोगे कि नहीं I will maintain मैं Monday 5 PM या Sunday 4 PM या whatever करूँगा बैठ के, life gets in the way, shit happens.
Yeah, market देख के करूँगा. I'll invest in ABC company.
Assuming you're not doing active trading, in our case it was the long-term index sort of wala scene. Again, both in India and Australia, we've got the same structure here in Australia, India, and then compounding just works out.
I think again, good segue to investment.
Yeah, correct. मैं भी वही सोच रहा था. Good segue to investment. So we know, I'm assuming you guys also, as you mentioned, are investing in India. Indian market तो बहुत बढ़िया चल रहा है. सबको अच्छे रिटर्न मिल रहे हैं, एकदम सब खुश हैं. कभी ना कभी जाएगा वो, पर आज तो सब खुश हैं. And because of we are Indians, access है हमारे पास, हमारे पहचान वाले भी हैं. In terms of your, actually, let's start with more basic and then we'll go to allocation. But more basic terms में, how are you, and if you're comfortable talking about it, how are you split in terms of instruments? So equity, which is stocks plus mutual funds, real estate, आपने बोला यहाँ नहीं है, पर maybe if you've invested in India, and then something like gold and crypto if you're interested in that. So yeah, if you're okay talking about that split.
In India or
percentage wise?
Australia?
Just
Across,
in general, like how do you
across your
guys view
portfolio.
your investment?
Best investment decision I made was hiring an investment manager and marrying him. So I will hand this over to my investment manager. एकदम succinct में बताओ.
I think मेरी philosophy काफी simple है.
Great tip for the listeners.
The most important thing for me is I can't invest into something if I can't explain it to my wife. Number one. Number two, both of us are not active real estate investors, which simplifies things for us because of the lifestyle we want to lead. Firstly, flexible. Real estate generally has a lot of handling costs. You need to know people. अगर आप rent पे चढ़ा रहे हो तो उसका अलग structure होता है and you want to be involved. I generally am a very lazy person. कि जितना मैं अपने आप को equation से हटा सकता हूँ, मुझे हटाना है. Number two is कि the biggest wealth creator known to man are the equity markets. Again, simplify it करो. The logic is not to try and beat market, it is to meet market. Generally split तो एक core portfolio है which is 80-20 लेके चलो या 90-10 लेके चलो. Broad global exposure across all the developed countries via index funds, low-cost index funds. That is where 85-90% of our savings go into. So अगर India में है, again, we don't have the time or the bandwidth to do active trading, and ITC has gone up and this has gone down. We've stopped actively investing in India, but जो portfolio है उसको reorient कर दिया, Nifty 50, Nifty Next 50. In our case, for example, this thing works. That's a smaller part of the portfolio. Active investment is going into new investments, rather going into, like I said, index funds. There's a 10% debt component, and बाकी जो 10% बचा है, वो थोड़ा सा time pass के लिए I play around. एक एक आदेश आया कि we should have some gold exposure, so there's some gold in that.
Small percentage though, but 10% I let him play around in new things like
Thematic funds, yeah, here there's a crypto element to it, and so on and so forth. But generally, equity oriented, simple, low cost, set and forget instruments. Now I've reached the level, and I'm just throwing this out there, maybe it's not for this audience, where I know enough and I understand enough what I'm playing around with leverage. So internally geared funds and so forth. But this is after 5-6 years. I feel ki now I understand it enough.
have you given
Well,
him
in
this in the how much we have
Yeah.
in Australia,
No.
global fund,
No, so
America?
I just said equity 80,
Okay.
80, debt about 10, and bucket and miscellaneous.
Okay.
In terms of global exposure, you
What-
guys actively invest in Australia as well? Or do you invest actively in Australian funds, or is it just global ETFs?
No, Australian funds as well. So home market bias ek hota hi hai. And
Mhm.
Australian investors in particular there's something called dividend franking, where if you're an Australian tax resident investing in Australia, you get superior returns.
Okay.
But my Australian exposure again is limited to 10% of total portfolio.
And so can you say that your major exposure is on the Indian side in terms of investment?
My major
Or
exposure is not Indian, global.
So emerging markets.
So there's a split between your developed world. The market cap split, dekho, America has 55% of the world's equities.
Yeah.
Then you've got the balance non-US developed markets, which would be 25%. Then you've got Australia, which typically is 2%. In our case, we are overweight Australia because it's home market for us. And then you've got emerging markets. Just mean we are overweight India because again, we have an India connection.
Got it.
We are overweight India, Australia. Otherwise, global cap case out.
On the Indian investment, so you're investing through a global fund and then choosing more Indian exposure
No,
there.
so in India we already have So in India, whatever funds we had while we were in Indian residents, we have maintained that. We have not increased our Indian exposure after moving to Australia. So we have an amount sitting under equity, which is being managed by a broker there, and वही चले जा रहा
नहीं
है.
उसमें भी हमने क्या किया था, we started off, I think both of us, we started off India में investing into a variety of mutual funds and A and O, and when we came here we had between us I think 40 mutual funds का exposure across India. So we came and we cleaned up that portfolio, तो पूरा उसको divest किया into, like I said, Nifty 50, Nifty Next 50. 75-25 is a split there, with एक थोड़ा सा again वहाँ भी there's a slightly concentrated exposure towards one or two particular companies, but that's easy random. But broad market दो fund set and forget वाला है, logic है. You're capturing immense share of market returns, and you're generally offsetting your risk.
And in terms of your fresh investments, you don't use INR, so it's more
Not in
global.
India.
Okay.
Because Indian taxation is the opposite of Australia. It's non-conducive if as a foreigner you're investing in India.
So can you just share a brief about, I think this would be very useful for audience, like since you're Australian citizens, like what makes sense in terms of investing in India and what doesn't make sense? Like in terms of taxation, in terms of leverage as well, what's the most useful asset if you have to invest in India? Like basically from a non-citizen point of view, what makes the most sense in terms of holding assets in India, like buying new assets in India, in terms of taxation benefits, in terms of like even repatriation of funds, etc.
Your perspective?
My perspective is it's just not very practical to do anything in India once you are a foreign citizen. They make it so difficult to do anything in India. While we would like to, it's just practically impossible to do anything. Like just changing my bank account from an Indian citizen to an NRI NRO account took me over 8 months to get it done.
But sorry to interrupt. But Abhi, would you be still holding an NRI NRO account? Or
Yes.
it
It is an NRI.
if you are, so this is lack of my knowledge. I always assumed कि NRE, NRO is specifically for non-resident Indians. पर आपके केस में does it apply?
No, because I'm Indian origin, I am
So
allowed to
OCI
hold
ke
NRO.
using
And
OCI,
OCI,
right?
PIO.
I haven't done the OCI. I have to do it. I don't know when I will do it, but I'm assuming that'll be another 6-8 month procedure. But because Indian origin, so they've given me an NRE, NRO as foreign resident, foreign national.
Got it.
Got it. Okay.
I think, Madhvesh, to answer your question, if I were to think about actively investing in India,
Mhm.
even though I have the means in terms of whether I can access the domestic market in India
Yeah.
through people in India,
Mhm.
I would rather use an international broker and an international fund to invest in India.
Yeah, I think that was the answer.
Ease of mind just makes that easier. And sorry?
You also have the dollar cost leverage by doing that.
Okay, correct. Yes, yes.
But what would you invest in?
Our investment remains the same. If we were to invest, broad market,
Okay.
because again, we went through this phase the last couple of years. They're like, you should be invest in real estate.
Mhm.
We got parents, we got family, we hair on ground. But even then, we weighed it up, and it just doesn't. The case doesn't make itself for us.
Mhm.
Because again, आप significant portion invest कर रहे हो, जो hands on maintain करना पड़ेगा. You always need to be on call to firefight and troubleshoot.
Yeah.
And average returns, the data tells us that average returns are inferior to pure equity returns. So I don't think I'm some kind of hero who can sit and find the next real estate nugget.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start towards closing the episode. ठीक है, as we move towards the conclusion, again, take the same example of this young couple who's exploring opportunities across the globe, and Australia is one of the options. If you had to sell Australia to them as a lucrative destination, what are the 3-4 points that you would mention? You can specify कि education अच्छा है, of course you mentioned taxes, culture, all of that. What would be the 3-4 points that you'll pitch?
You want to go first? For me, I think top 3 points. Very difficult to say because there's so much. The first one would be if you want a chill life. You're tired of just the everyday rut. You're tired of just doing home, work, home, and work. Australia is a great place to do that because work life balance is the biggest thing. Second would be just the quality of life is incredible. It's so high that now anywhere we travel, we find it not comparable. We breathe clean air, AQI is 5. We drink water from the tap and we get top quality produce. So just quality of life is so good. And third is for the first time after coming to this country, I felt proud of being diverse. The Australians celebrate diversity. They encourage you to impart that to your child as well. So I speak to my son only in Marathi. I don't think I would do that in India. Yeah.
And now the daycare's asked you for.
And the daycare now wants to learn some phrases in Marathi so they can speak to him in Marathi
Wow.
as well. Yes. So
we've sent a list, a
Incredible.
full page. He write the list of words, and the daycare instructors will learn those Marathi words and speak to Ray in Marathi.
So he isn't shy or ashamed to speak his native tongue. So Australia just embraces diversity so much. Like people come to me and ask me, "Oh, what's the color of your skin?" Which I used to be ashamed of in India is celebrated here. So it is contrary to anything that you've heard or read or watched in the news, and at least from our personal experience, it is far less racist than India itself.
And that's actually a very interesting point because me and Madhvesh and a lot of our viewers watch a lot of cricket. And
90s
even
में,
outside
early
of
2000s
cricket.
में cricket में was the whole thing.
अरे नहीं अभी
But
भी
was
ना
it
अभी
racism
तो
or was
इंडियन
it
टीम
just
गई थी
heckling
तो
on
they
the
were
field?
yeah
But I
अच्छा
think
sorry what
I've also been to Australia and I faced racism, but I would not use that as a generic because I've been there only for a short period of time.
And also, you have bad experiences everywhere.
I think you don't conflate that with assholes. Assholes are present everywhere.
Yeah, true.
Is that a
I
systemic
agree.
problem or no? वो अलग बात होती है.
True.
Yeah. So those are my top 3 selling points. I hope I've sold you guys on it.
हम तो नहीं आ रहे.
पता
But,
नहीं.
50% tax.
We're like
दिमाग खराब है.
50% टैक्स में इतना तो हम इतना सना हुआ है हमारे अंदर देसी पना के हम 50% दे हो गया नहीं. But
I think मैं एक
Rohan,
चीज ऐड करूंगा, which was my original sort of thing, कि I still believe and feel कि यार I don't think आज के दिन में there is any other country which will give you इतना tactical advantage in a short period. If of course this is a driving factor for you, कि you can switch out your passport, which then gives you access to a whole. Australians get a different visa altogether to work in the US, for instance. 10,000 इशू होते हैं हर साल, 4,500 यूज होते हैं. 5,500 visas are wasted. It's an Australian only visa stream because Australians don't want to go to
wow,
the US. So
Yeah.
tactical
very interesting.
advantages. कि आपने 4 साल लगा दिए, if you switch out your passport, you can then go back to India, go to different countries, live and work.
That's good. I had one more question as you were, in terms of, and this will be the final one from my side, and we can go to MK if he has another. Ki opportunity wise, because, and we both are, me and MK are from the tech sector. To my understanding of Australia, the tech scene in Australia is that because it is a important country globally, there are offices of tech giants and that Atlassian who come from Australia originally. But apart from even जो बड़े Meta, Google हैं, उनके it's mostly sales offices, and there are a few companies there from the tech scene in general. And maybe I'm biased towards tech, but across industries, how is the within the country for general growth? Because most big companies are US companies, so they'll that's what we've observed in Singapore also, कि there is a ceiling where अगर आप corporate ladder में हो तो एक ceiling के beyond the opportunities get very limited. So is it the same in Australia? Is there a startup culture there? उस तरीके से how is the opportunities?
Do you remember how I said when we got married, we moved on one job? I had to quit
Right.
Microsoft. So I was with Microsoft in India. And like you rightly said, यहाँ पे just छोटा सा sales office and there wasn't much. So I had to quit Microsoft and move here. So yes, in terms of tech, Australia is still 10 years behind India and America. The big offices are just tiny tech delivery and sales offices. So opportunities, while they are there, they're limited, in my opinion. But because it is a growing market, there is need for it. There should be growth in the future. But yes, it is quite limited, I would say. Yes.
How is the university scene also for, because generally good universities also translate into companies coming into that area and having more jobs. So university wise, if you have an idea ki global stage pe, how do they stand?
My knowledge here is limited because I haven't studied in Australia. I don't know too many people who have either. Rohan, universities, I don't know much. है क्या यहाँ पे global? Melbourne Uni, it was, yeah.
But yeah, दो चीजें हैं. एक is to your first point, tech. Australia is not the place for tech. If you want to climb the corporate ladder in tech, Australia is the last country to go to. Australia fundamentally you go to as a lifestyle choice. And even within that, work-wise, metals and minerals, financial services, professional services. That's 80% of the market. Tech is the balance. Australia has historically become very wealthy because of metals and minerals. And उसके ऊपर आपका finance आया and professional services आए. वही उसका construct है. And education, lots of universities here are very good outside of the top 10% band. एक बड़ा cluster आएगा. Because a lot of people use education as a way to move to Australia. So it's a big part of the economy. It drives a lot of the economic growth. But you will not move to Australia to get a placement. कि मैं अब जाके मेलबर्न यूनी पढ़ाई करूंगा to get a placement in Goldman Sachs. You will move there to build a life in Australia.
See, Australia is basically to chill. You don't come here to work or to find a job and do those kind of things. For that, to make money and to grow in your corporate world, it's America or India.
I think it ties back to the three check boxes you mentioned, right?
What values
having a
matter
balance,
to you?
yeah.
I'll give you a great example. My brother, he does BMBA, BCG like me. For him, उसका एक objective है कि I want to climb the corporate ladder, and more importantly, he wants to optimize for money. So despite me saying Australia, he's not going to come to Australia anytime soon. But eventually, I'm hoping जब उसकी शादी होगी, if he chooses to have a family, वो बोलेगा कि why am I working 60-hour weeks? फिर मैं बोलूँगा I'm working 35-hour weeks. फिर वो बोलेगा okay ठीक है मैं आ रहा हूँ. They passed a law in the Australian Parliament a few weeks ago. It is illegal for your employer to contact you after 5 p.m.
Wow.
It's illegal. Weekend to छोड़ो, 5 p.m. on a work day, they will cop a hefty fine.
तो हम सोच भी नहीं सकते ऐसी चीजें. आउट ऑफ बाउंड.
अरे खुद नहीं लगाते हैं अपने.
हाँ, हम खुद को ही हमको शर्म आई. हम 5 बजे के बाद अगर हमने काम नहीं किया तो छी ये कैसे. Quite different lives.
I have one other question. I just want to talk about retirement and FIRE, which I think is a big aspect of NRI life. Do you guys believe in the concept of FIRE? If yes, what's your target? If not, like, how do you evaluate stuff? So yeah, over to you on that.
Of course I do.
Why?
Because it's helped us and shaped our daily life. I mean,
Australia itself seems fire, yaar.
I think the cheat code to this is you move to Australia, you're halfway there.
No, fire, just having a goal helps you understand where you want to get to. Otherwise, you're just doing everything for what, right? एक number achieve करो, फिर retire. Yeah, I don't want to work till I'm 60, 65, 70. If I achieve my fire number earlier, then why not? My goal.
I think the important thing for me and for us is the optionality it gives us. We are very conscious in many cases, throws a hatke view of how we want to lead our lives as compared to the average peer set we've got. And so there's a bunch of stuff we want to do throughout our life. And we want to get to it as soon as possible. So what the ability to have a passive income stream does is it makes your 9 to 5 days a week optional. If both of us no longer need to go earn money, spend our time earning money to be able to sustain our desired quality of life. Here, I mean, I want to go to Doon and teach for a bit. She wants to go to culinary school. There's a bunch of stuff you want to do. Set up a small social impact fund. There's a couple of things she wants to do. वो सब कर सकते हो without compromising on other things or the future of your child or so forth. So yes, from that point of view, very important to us. And we've been working towards it. There's a goal. We're well on track. And again, the listeners will know, okay, it's not very complicated. It's a very simple structure to it. It's just the next step. A lot of people, I feel like they save without knowing what they're saving for or how much should they save or what are the parameters of their saving. The moment you give thoda sa structure to it and you overlay that with a goal, it suddenly adds so much more context. And that context is what keeps you on track, I feel.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like your goal should have impacting purposes, which makes that goal and the journey also to achieve that goal more valuable.
Perhaps you enjoy it, right? You enjoy, for example, our goals 5 years ago were different when we didn't have Ray. Now they've changed. So you take stock, you update them accordingly. And as you go through the journey, you hit mini milestones and you feel happy. You feel you have a positive feedback loop saying, I'm doing things and they're on track and I'm feeling good. I'm in control of my destiny.
Cool. And if you have to put a number, it could be like 40x your yearly spend, or it's like a 50 million or 100 million, whatever. Like, what would you put the fire number for you?
We
Is
had
it?
a way of calculating it,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
quite simple. In our case, we've taken the 25x multiple.
Okay.
That
Okay.
sort of fits well with the Australian context.
Cool.
That's our number.
Yeah.
We're 7 years away from it. 7 years, 8 years away from it.
Yeah. I know it's a long round question, but you guys intend to retire in Australia, is it? Or you might want to move to different places, go back to
No, so
India?
Australia will always be home for us.
Mm-hmm.
This will always be our base. And like he said, we want to do different things.
Yeah.
One of Rohan's dreams for his son is to attend a school in India, which he went to, the Doon School. In 10 years, if my son moves to India, I move to India with him.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to do a lot of things, one of which is experience different cultures, live in different countries. So Australia will always be home, and dekhenge. We'll do this chat again in 5 years in a new country with a new perspective.
That would be great follow up. I think those were all the discussion topics that we had for today. I would say that this is a very enriching discussion for us, as well as I would assume for our audience as well. And I would also like to thank both of you for the time you gave for this record, and hope to continue this conversation on a different episode.
Absolutely. We thoroughly enjoyed talking to the both of you. And it also helps us reminisce about our journey and reinforces why we do what we do.
Cool. Thanks a lot, folks.
Thanks.
Sid,
Bye.
you
Have
have
a
any
lovely weekend.
Thank you guys. Have a good weekend.